VR's using standard HDMI cables. They're not designed for movement. The HDMI cable persisted as a problem. The ideal thing was to ultimately solve the problem for the headset cable so that we could have something that was robust and sturdy enough to hold up to the rigorous use.
All right, we are here, day 3, last day for the VIVE Theater, courtesy of HTC at the IAAPA convention in Orlando. In case you don't know where you are, that's where we're coming from. I'm here with Den Bavenport. Sorry, it is day 3. We'll fix that in post. No, we won't. I'm here with Ben Davenport, who is the founder and CEO of VRsenal. And VRsenal, Ben, you've been trying to solve one of the biggest problems that the VR industry has had in the amusement industry since I first met you at this show in 2017, I think, which is how do you make the equipment more durable, how do you make the cables more durable, and how do you make VR unattended, right? So the first step was how do you make it unattended? And then when you don't have an attendant there, you got people doing stupid shit with the equipment, and so then how do you build it so it can stand up to the abuse that that happens in a family entertainment center where people want to swing on it and kick it and drop it. And I had Todd Monsell said to me the other day, he had a great thing. He said when they put 50 cents in a machine, they think they own that machine for the next 3 minutes and they can do whatever they want with it.
That's true.
And so yeah, so so it started with Beat Saber. Give us a little bit of history around the first version of the VRsenal unit, and then we'll kind of walk up to the latest version.
Well, yeah, it did start with Beat Saber, which, as you know, is a super interactive game. I think the guys at Valve actually had to increase the speed of the tracking devices that they had originally designed in order to keep up with it. And so it ended up being a super vigorous experience that people just, went to town on swinging. And, we were tempted to just build the more simulator type VR experience where it's a little easier to build because you sit down, you put the headset on, and you don't have a lot of movement. But Beat Saber was definitely a trial by fire to develop a fully automated experience with that, because you got the headset and you've got the controllers, and we definitely learned the hard way that people like to swing on things.
And 7 years ago, like nobody knew what VR was even, right? And so, the ability to give them instructions on how to get into the experience without somebody to explain it there was super challenging. And you guys did a great job of walking people through one step at a time. So,
yeah, well, we learned early on that you couldn't program humans. You had to figure out what the humans wanted to do. And you just kind of had to get ahead of that. And we originally tried to get them to pick up the controllers first and then put on the headset. But no matter what we did, no matter how much audio instruction or video instruction, everybody wanted to put on the headset. So finally we had to just say, forget it. We're going to tell them to put on the headset and pretend like it was our idea. Because they're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's good. And so what were some of the learnings from V1? So you got it out there. Beat Saber was a wildly popular game. It got into a lot of arcades. What was some of the lessons from that first version that then led to the changes that you started making?
Well, definitely we found out really quickly that the cables were the weak point of the whole system, whether that was controller cables or whether that was the headset cable. And that's just the nature of the cable. That's not even, VR's using standard HDMI cables. That's not the fault of the VR industry. Those cables existed prior to the current iteration of VR, and by their very nature, they're moving so much data through them that there's dozens of wires inside of there to carry the data and the power. And of course, if you're going to get dozens of wires, and we've all seen an HDMI cable, it's not that big.
Well, actually, no,
that's a different one. But it's a small cable, and it's got lots of wires, and every one of those wires to fit into that cable has to be super small.
Yeah, it's like they're hair fine, right?
That's right.
And they're designed, the HDMI cable is designed to go behind the wall, right, and power your TV. Like that's what it's purpose fit for. It's not designed to be in a jungle gym.
They're not designed for movement. They're not designed for high flex cycles. They're certainly not designed for people to hang on. And so we found out the hard way that was a pain point, and not an easy one to fix. We got the controller cables upgraded first because there's less data going through there. There was only four conductors inside of those cables, so it was easier. It still took us about half a year to find a cable that would hold up to those flex cycles, but we were able to do that first. But the HDMI cable persisted as a problem.
And you did a lot to try to protect it. You did this whole retraction system where it would pull the headset up so people couldn't hang on, and if they did pull it down, it would pull down and it would yell at them, and other companies had copied that, so you built a lot of electromechanical complexity into the device to try to protect this critical cable.
But that, of course, came with its own problems, because now you have moving parts and
pulleys and motors and shit. Yeah.
Right. So that adds maintenance there, and so the ideal thing was to ultimately solve the problem for the headset cable, so that we could have something that was robust and sturdy enough to hold up to the rigorous use, and then we could get rid of the retraction system and all of those moving parts.
All right, so that takes us to this new headset that you've done. You were doing the original with the kind of the OG Vive and the Vive Pro, and then the Focus 3 came out. And walk us through kind of the first of all, what gave you the idea that you could even do this? Because no one's done it before, to my knowledge, no one's done it since, and you've been showing this in the market for a year or so now. And so what gave you the idea that you could go to, and let's show the cable, like let's show the end. We'll show the end of the result, and then we'll work backwards. Sorry, it's hard to do with a microphone, right?
Yeah, it's hard to do that.
But so there's 4 wires in this cable that go between the PC and the headset. And that replaces, I don't know, 30 some odd wires in the HDMI cable. And these are 22 gauge wires. Like, they're really super beefy. And so what gave you the idea that you could take all of the information and power going through an HDMI deep DisplayPort cable and put it through 4 wires?
I mean, I wish I could say it came to me in a flash of brilliance, but it didn't. It came from years of, I mean, we have some 800 units in the field, and there's about 1 million people that play our units on a monthly basis, and we do all the maintenance on those in 11 different countries. And so the problems that our customers have are the problems we have, and so we were as motivated as anyone to figure out how to solve that, and we kept coming at it from different directions, and ultimately we just through experimentation, we finally came up with a way to add a PCB onto the headset under the armor. We fully armor the Focus 3. It's a great headset. We saw that headset and we're like, this is it. This is a great headset. But of course, it was designed to run on batteries, and so we armored it up. We took out the battery. We put in a PCB that plugs into not only the headset, but there's a PCB that plugs into the computer, and it completely reroutes the power and the data structure. And that, we were able to route it through the same cable that we had been using for years for our controller cables, and we knew that those had really high longevity under really, really heavy use. And so I think we're the only VR company in the industry that offers 2-year warranties on our cables, on our headset cables, and on our controller cables. It really was just a necessity. We got sick of things breaking. Our customers were sick of things breaking, and so, in necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention. So that certainly was the case here.
Now you've got, again, you've always been known for armoring the headsets, and this is all 3D printed, custom for the headset. What's the next? So where do you go from here? Like so we can talk about cost. Like this, there's a lot of expense in making this, right? So you've got a multi-layer PC board in the computer. You've got another multi-layer PC board in the headset. You've got all of this kind of custom 3D printed armor, and let's talk a little bit about just the economics, right? Of of replacing cables every, it starts out usually the first one will last a quarter, and then the tech has to replace, and then all of a sudden the technicians they're not all quite competent and capable about swapping out the cables, so they don't heat them when they bend them properly, and then they break. And it only takes one or two of those 30 wires to break for the customer experience to degrade. It might still work, but the customer experience isn't quite at 100%, which can cause some motion sickness and frame drops and stuff like that. And then ultimately it gets to the point where it doesn't work anymore, and then it sits out of commission for a week or two while they wait for cables. During the pandemic, you couldn't even get cables, right, for a year.
Yeah.
So walk us through the economics of, because this is basically a $4,000 conversion kit, right? If somebody would want to buy these and put it on a virtual Rabbids or a Storm or something, it's like a $4,000 headset. So walk us through.
The whole headset fully assembled with all of the...
Yeah, with the circuit boards and the cable and the armor and everything,
basically
right?
ready to plug in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's an expensive proposition as far as off the base model, and you look at that and it say, well, that's a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, and you look and say, well, if I replace the headset cable, once a month, then that costs me a few $100s. You can look at that and say, well, over a year, that's $2,400. Well, that's the upcharge on this versus off of a basic unit. And the real thing is that the real loss is not even the cost to change the cables. It's the downtime. It always breaks on the weekend, right? I mean, it's
it's hard to get parts on the weekend, so you're not going to, and your techs are too busy on the weekend to fix it, so you put an out of order sign on it and you deal with it on Monday, right? And we know that some of the high-end simulators generate, $50,000, $100,000 a year in revenue. So if you're down for a week, you lose $1,000, $2,000, and if it goes down 4 times a year, you're at $4,000 to $8,000 in lost revenue as well, right?
Yeah, and so that's the real cost, is the downtime, and of course the frustration. We built this for ourselves to solve our own problems, and the reason why we decided to offer it to other players in the industry is just simply because it's something that causes pain point, and people don't necessarily associate that pain point just with this company or that company. They associate it with VR, and then you start getting this thing where somebody bought a machine and it caused them a lot of problems. Their tech was constantly complaining about it. And then, we show up and say, hey, try this. And they're like, I hate VR. My tech hates VR. And then it's like, oh, my goodness. I mean, it's just, and so it's kind of like, it's something that needs to be addressed, at the industry level.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And one of the things that, I've been talking to recently, Pete Gustafson at the AAMA, they have a standardization committee. And one of their roles is to, try to get standardized parts. And one of the things that led to the explosion of the arcade game industry, for those of you that weren't around back when I was young, there was a thing called JAMA, the Japanese Amusement Machine Association, and they created a standard for the harness. The JAMA harness is still kind of used today as the thing that made you could plug into any button, any joystick, all the controllers and the interfaces with the coin mech and the ticket dispensers were all standardized. And there's a real call. There was just a survey that was sent out by the AAMA to the operators. And the number one thing they said they want to see, the number one thing they want to see standardized is headsets and cables. And I don't know that we're going to standardize the headsets. I do think it's good for the industry to have options. Right now, I think the Focus 3 has become kind of as close to an industry standard as we've seen. But that doesn't mean other companies are going to come into it. But if we could standardize the cable, and then every cable is the same across all the systems, and it works and it lasts. So I do think that we're going to see an industry movement to try to standardize around this design. And I'm going to put you on the spot. Like, what's the, how do you feel about letting go of this technology to a certain extent and getting it out? Because as you've said, it's going to help. A rising tide lifts all ships, right? And
a sinking tide sinks all ships, and so
grounds them all, right? Yeah.
It goes both ways, and a black eye for one VR product that's the first VR product somebody's tried is a black eye for all VR products. So we kind of saw that, and it's just like it is something that just needs to be done on a wider scale, so that we can just kind of start to remove some of those friction points from VR. That is, it's got so much going for it. obviously people like it, customers like it. There's lots of great things to be said for it. If we can remove those negatives, then you remove that friction. And it's not just friction felt by the consumers, it's friction felt by the guys who have to maintain these units. And so much of the industry's mindset is shaped by what they hear from their techs. And if it's a pain point for the tech is going to just run down that equipment and that concept.
But one of the things I think I've seen is that the techs have limited budgets. I've talked to some operators where, in fact, I was talking to one who had a big crane machine, one of those giant room scale crane machines that sat down in his arcade for 6 months because they didn't have the OpEx budget for parts to repair it. And so I think the operators with the labor crunch and the economy, they're pulling back, prices are going up, and they're pulling back on repair budgets. And so for a tech to say, hey, I'll just keep buying $200 cables on eBay or Amazon, I don't have a $4,000 budget for this. Like, how do they? Yeah. How do they warrant that? So what do we have to do to bring the price of that thing down? Is it volume? Like, if we get volume up, does price go down, or what do we have to do to make it more accessible budgetary-wise?
Well, I mean, I think it's a general rule of the market and economics that when volume goes up, price comes down. Right now, it's a very custom product. It's handmade, and a lot of it just comes down to a lot of people are not willing to spend any extra money. They think the base model is too expensive, and you got to kind of look at that. And I think some education in that area of being like, you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later.
Yeah, but I think what's happening is the operators are holding the manufacturers accountable. And so the operators are saying, my manufacturer should deal with this. I shouldn't have to have the burden. If I spend $50,000 on a simulator, don't make me pay another $8,000 to make it fit for purpose. Right? And so there's this real tension right now, I think, between the operators and the manufacturers, where it's like, and what I'm hoping we do with this content is show everybody that this is possible. It's actually possible to do it. And yeah, it's going to make the price go up, and I think operators need to go back to the manufacturers and start saying, why aren't you doing this? And we know we have one large operator, I won't name them, but actually went to another VR company who wanted to sell them a system and said, figure this shit out. And I don't know that they did, and we'll see what happens. But I do think that tension is there, and this is going to ultimately have to be something that other manufacturers are willing to adopt, and it might bring the price of the product up, or it might impact their margins, but ultimately it's an industry solution, and we have to figure out how to do it. And I've been working with HTC trying to say, how do you guys help? How does the headset manufacturer help make this happen? Because it's the thing that's killing us right now.
Yeah. And I think that is the thing. It's that VR is already an expensive price point when you buy the unit. Customers are sensitive to that, therefore manufacturers are sensitive of doing anything that would raise that price. And yet, if you sell a unit that doesn't have the appropriate cabling and stuff, the customers are going to pay one way or the other, because they're going to pay in downtime and they're going to pay in replacement parts. That's not obvious if you've never owned VR before. It's not obvious that you're going to pay. And so that's why I say education and communication are critical, so that it's like, hey, the customer comes to realize I'm saving money by spending a bit more, and then the manufacturers need to hear that we're willing to spend an additional $5,000 to have something that doesn't break on a monthly basis. And then I think you can kind of get over some of that hump. But I think a big chunk of it is that VR is already on the higher end of the price point, and then that makes everybody sensitized to anything that could raise that, and so we end up getting stuck with the problems, not because there aren't currently solutions, but because everybody's afraid to spend more money than is already being spent.
I also believe, we have a 3-level system in this industry. We have manufacturing, distribution, and operators, and I've talked to a lot of distributors that actually hate VR because the customers call the distributor to hold them accountable, and the manufacturer's like, yeah, that's your problem, and so you've got this real tension in up and down channel, like a couple of Joe cameras nodding, right? Yeah, and so how do we, I think that this is just, we need to have a really hard, honest conversation and bring these stakeholders together and say, okay, look, this is a problem, and you can't just keep pointing. It's like I had a Dell computer that ran Windows, and this shit would stop working, and I'd call Dell, and they'd make me call Microsoft, and Microsoft support would make me call Dell, and they're pointing fingers to each other, and it's like, come on, for fuck's sake, I just want my computer to work. And so
what that's done is it's not like anybody wants to pay more money. And so and we get that even sometimes from operators of being like, well, we have this solution, and it's like, but that's too much. I could buy this on Amazon, or I could do this, and it's just like, so what that's done is that keeps volumes low, which keeps prices high. And
look, this can't be the only industry that's suffering from that too. Like you've got military industry, which is spending a lot of money, government, and this is something that HTC, I think can play a role in as well. And I'm putting pressure on the team at HTC to say, hey, look at this stuff, and maybe you can license it and build it in volume and build it in as a SKU. And now we have a fit-for-purpose SKU for the amusement industry that, yeah, it's more expensive, but it's the frickin' shit that everybody wants. And so I'm just going to keep banging that drum. And look, and I just want to say, thank you for the work that you guys do. You're incredibly innovative, and you're doing things that people thought aren't possible. And just keep doing that, and I'll keep banging the drum, and hopefully people start paying attention.
Well, and we still have a lot to learn. I mean, our products aren't perfect. We just try to do our best to hear the complaints about the pain points and try to come up with solutions with each iteration. So we're still learning ourselves.
Appreciate you. Oh, hold on. Joe Camerato's coming. Come on. Question.
Not a question so much as a statement. Cost really is irrelevant. It's ROI. It's return on investment. You look at the games in here today. The average game back in the day was maybe 5,000. Now it's up to 20,000. And some of the more extravagant games are 40, 50, 60,000. It's all about the return and how fast that return is. So cost is not really the factor. It's reliability, functionality, and return on investment. So if the game is, you're selling a VR for 100,000, now it's 105, but it's going to work throughout the year, that's a home run.
Right.
So that's really the key.
Right.
Yeah, and yes, and there's also psychology, right? When somebody knows a product is $50,000 and you make them spend $60,000 for it, they're like, well, wait a second, I bought it for $50. And we're struggling with that inflation. I was talking to a large FEC operator this week, and they're slowing down their growth of new locations because they're getting sticker shock on the construction bids. It is what it is. The prices aren't going down. They never go down. The rate that they go up might slow down, but they're losing sites because they're not able to move. And so there is a psychological component to it too, Joe. But I agree with you. Ultimately, it's down to ROI. So yeah, thank you. So anyway, that's it for this session from the Vive Theater. We're going to be back top of the hour, and yeah, keep tuning in. We'll be back.